Hello.
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 Today we talk about banks and money.
And we meet this man, Chris Bailey, who works at the Bank of England.
Banks and money. What do you use your bank for?
I use the bank for paying in my salary each month.
I use it to cash my checks, basically. That's really all I use it for.
I never go into a bank. I simply use it as a method of storing my money and drawing it out.
I use a bank for my checking and my savings accounts.
I personally would be very happy if I never had to walk into a bank again in my life. I'd much rather keep my money in a tin trunk underneath my bed.
I've just opened an account at my local bank here in London. I'm waiting for a checkbook. Instead, I got a letter from the bank this morning. Dear Mr. Dutcher, thank you for opening an account with us. Unfortunately, your checkbook might be delayed. Wonderful. Your checkbook might be delayed. Might be delayed. Perhaps it will be late.
Can I help you?
Yes. I'd like £1 million to be transferred from my current account to my deposit account.
I'm sorry, I'm very busy.
Are you going to transfer the money?
Of course not. You haven't got £1 million.
In that case, I'd like to close my account.
Fine, no problem. Goodbye. Did you hear that? He wanted me to transfer £1 million to his deposit account.
Yes, that's Mr. Higgins. He's the bank's biggest customer.
Oh, no. Mr. Higgins, come back.
He was richer than he looked. That customer had 2 bank accounts. He had a current account. That's the account you use a checkbook with. It's also called a checking account. He also had a deposit account. That's an account which pays you interest on your savings. It's also called a savings account. The customer wanted a rather special service from the bank.
I'd like £1 million to be transferred from my current account to my deposit account. To be transferred.
And Kevin wants something from his bank.
I'd like a checkbook to be sent to me immediately. I said I'd like a checkbook to be sent to me immediately. I told the bank that I wanted a checkbook to be sent to me immediately, but the letter says it might be delayed. I wonder why.
Well, your references have to be checked.
Do they? Oh.
Perhaps it's just a problem with the machine that prints the checkbooks.
What sort of problem?
Well, the machine might be broken.
Do you think so?
Well...
Yes, that must be the reason.
Oh.
Your references have to be checked. Your references have to be checked.
The machine might be broken. The machine might be broken. Britain's central bank is called the Bank of England. Chris Bailey works at the Bank of England, and he's going to tell us about the work that is done by the bank.
The Bank of England is Britain's central bank. Every country has a central bank. We are the government's bank, and we are the issuers of the money, of the notes that circulate in Britain. Some countries have independent central banks where, by constitution or by law, the central bank is set up separately from the government. But in this country, the Bank of England is owned by the government. They own all our shares. We are part of the government team. So we give advice to the Treasury and to our Chancellor of the Exchequer and to the Prime Minister on monetary policy, what would be an appropriate policy, how fast to let the money supply grow. Once the elected politicians, once our democratic government have reached policy decisions based on our advice, we then carry out those policies.
One of the main functions of the Bank of England is to print and issue banknotes. How is that done?
The printing of banknotes is a very complex function. We have to be sure that our notes are as secure against counterfeiting and forgery as they possibly can be. So we want to use the latest printing techniques that are available. We reissue the currency notes about every 10 to 15 years in Britain. If we didn't do that, there's a risk that notes could easily be forged because printing technologies change. We need to be ahead of the counterfeiters. For example, one of the problems which all central banks face these days is that of the colour copier machine. Notes might be forged on a colour copier simply by putting them into the machine and people having a go. We keep ahead of that, partly because of the very complex paper we use, which is not at all like copier machine paper, and partly by the intense patterns and colour combinations in the banknotes, which make it very difficult for a copying machine to reproduce them accurately. We have to be ahead of the technology, which means we have to redesign the product every 10 or 15 years.
Has the public's use of banknotes changed?
The use that the public make of paper money is rather less today than it was, say, 20 or 30 years ago. Typically, a man or woman working in a factory today will have their salary paid to them by a cheque, whereas 20 years ago, probably somebody came around and gave them an envelope with banknotes inside it. That has changed. People now, when they go shopping, don't pay large amounts of cash across the counter. They use a credit card, or perhaps they use a cheque. So people can economise on banknotes. We print as many banknotes as the public want to use, but the relationship between the amount of banknotes we need to print and the amount of money the public can spend has changed.
Chris Bailey explained that the Bank of England is the government's bank.
The bank gives financial advice to the government and then carries out the government's financial policies.
He also talked about one of the other main jobs of the Bank of England. It prints all the banknotes. And it has to protect the public against forgery. That's when false banknotes are produced by criminals. This is what Chris said.
Notes could be forged, and people use some quite simple methods to do this. Notes might be forged on a colour copier. That's a colour photocopier.
The Bank of England isn't an ordinary bank. You can't open a bank account there. Well, you can't unless you work there. So what banking services does the Bank of England provide for the people who do work there, its staff?
The services that the bank provides to its staff customers are the same as those provided by a commercial bank. Cash can be drawn out across a counter. Cash can be drawn out through the automatic teller machines, which commercial banks, of course, have on the outside of their buildings. Foreign exchange can be bought, either foreign exchange notes or traveller's cheques. Bills can be paid through banks. It's possible to have your utility bill paid, electricity or gas or telecommunications bills. These can be paid through banks. Taxes can be paid through banks. The Bank of England provides all these services to its staff, just as commercial banks provide them to men and women in general in Britain.
Good morning. Good morning. Can I change these dollars into pounds, please? Certainly. 20, 40, 50. Exchange rate's 1.6. All right. There's £31.25. That's fine.
There's a £2 commission charge for that. How'd you like your money?
In fives, please?
Certainly. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. It's 29.25.
Thank you. I also have this international money order. Can I pay it into my current account?
Yeah, is it in sterling or in dollars?
It's in sterling.
Yeah, you can take it to any one of the cashiers.
Fine, thanks.
Okay.
There's been a revolution in commercial banking in Britain over the last 20 years. Indeed, a revolution in commercial banking in many parts of the world. Of course, one thing that has changed in commercial banking is the technology. In addition to those technological changes, there's much more competition in banking these days. Nowadays, if you go to a bank and you have a checking account, the bank will probably pay you interest on that checking account because it wants your savings. 20 years ago, that would probably not have been the case. So it's a much more competitive and user-friendly banking system today.
You can only have an account at the Bank of England if you work there.
And if you work there, it's just like an ordinary bank.
With all the usual services.
Cash can be drawn out. You can take money from your account. Foreign exchange can be bought. You can buy dollars, pesetas, lira, yen. Bills can be paid through the bank. And taxes can be paid through the bank.
Listen again to some of the things that were said in the bank.
Good morning. Can I change these dollars into pounds, please?
Exchange rate's 1.6. There's a £2 commission charge for that. How'd you like your money?
In fives, please?
Today, we met Chris Bailey from the Bank of England.
What's that, David?
It's a cheque from my aunt. I'll buy you both dinner tonight.
Great.
Thank you.
But I must get to my bank before it closes. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.